Tom Cruise confronts a rude talk show host. His response leaves the audience speechless. The bright lights of the studio flickered to life as the audience erupted into applause. The sleek, modern set gleamed under the spotlights, shiny black floors, oversized LED screens, and the signature deep red couch that had hosted countless celebrities. Tonight, however, felt different. There was a buzzing energy in the air, a tension that wasn't typical of the Ryan Blake Show, a popular late-night talk show known more for its humor than its controversy. Ryan Blake, the charismatic but notoriously blunt host, adjusted his crisp navy suit as he prepared for the evening's headline guest, Tom Cruise. Known for his blockbuster hits, jaw-dropping stunts, and undeniable charm, Tom wasn't just another A-lister. He was Hollywood royalty. But Ryan? He had a reputation for pushing boundaries, sometimes too far. "All right, people, tonight's gonna be epic." Ryan hyped the live audience, his voice booming. "We've got the one and only Tom Cruise in the house." The crowd roared. Backstage, Tom Cruise sat calmly in the green room, dressed casually in a black t-shirt and jeans, his signature smile intact. Despite decades in the spotlight, he radiated an effortless humility. His assistant, Claire, hovered nearby, phone in hand. "You know Ryan's a bit unpredictable, right?" Claire warned, her brows raised. Tom chuckled. "Claire, I've been jumping out of planes and climbing skyscrapers for decades. I think I can handle a talk show host." She wasn't convinced. "Just be prepared. He loves getting reactions." Minutes later, the iconic introduction music played, and Ryan called out, "Give it up for the legend himself, Tom Cruise." Thunderous applause shook the studio as Tom stepped onto the stage, flashing that familiar grin. He waved to the crowd, his energy infectious, and took his seat across from Ryan. "Tom, man, it's insane having you here," Ryan started, though there was a hint of mischief behind his words. "Happy to be here," Tom replied, settling in. The initial questions were light, talking about his latest film, some on-set stories, even a few playful jokes about his daredevil stunts. The audience was hooked. But then Ryan's tone shifted. "So Tom," Ryan began, leaning forward with a smirk, "you ever think about slowing down? I mean, you're not exactly young anymore. Still doing your own stunts. Isn't it, I don't know, a little desperate?" The audience gasped, some in shock, others in awkward laughter. Claire, watching backstage, froze mid-text. Tom didn't flinch. He smiled, but there was something deeper in his eyes now, a calm confidence that filled the space. Ryan, sensing the tension but pushing anyway, added, "I mean, come on, man. You're worth $500 million, and you're still hanging off planes? Trying a little too hard to stay relevant." The studio fell silent. Cameras zoomed in, catching every twitch, every breath. Tom slowly set down his coffee cup, leaned in slightly and, still smiling, prepared to respond. The entire room hung on his next words. The silence in the studio stretched thin, the weight of Ryan's jab hanging in the air. The audience wasn't sure whether to laugh, gasp, or hold their breath. Even Ryan, who thrived on pushing his guests to their limits, felt a flicker of uncertainty. Tom Cruise, however, didn't break a sweat. He leaned back slightly, his easygoing smile still intact, but his eyes now carried something different: depth, patience, and the kind of quiet strength that didn't need to prove itself. "You know, Ryan," Tom began, his voice calm but clear, "I get that question a lot. People wonder why I keep doing what I do, why I'm still out there, hanging off cliffs, jumping from planes, pushing my limits." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience. "But the thing is, it was never about staying relevant. It's about passion. It's about doing what you love, regardless of how others see it." There was a soft murmur of agreement from the crowd, but Ryan wasn't ready to back down. "Yeah, but don't you think there's a time to, I don't know, move on? Maybe let the younger guys take the spotlight? People say you're just chasing adrenaline at this point." The audience flinched at the bluntness. Claire, watching backstage, rubbed her temples. "Here we go." Tom didn't react the way Ryan expected. Instead, he chuckled softly. "You know," Tom said, "there's this story about a carpenter. He spent his entire life building homes, not because he had to, but because he loved the craft. Even when people told him to retire, he kept going. Not for the paycheck, not for fame, but because there was something deeply fulfilling about seeing a project come to life. knowing he gave it his all. I guess I'm that carpenter. A soft wave of applause broke through the tension. Ryan shifted in his seat, clearly trying to regain control of the moment. That's poetic, Tom, really. But don't you think people sometimes hold on to things because they're afraid of what comes next? Like what happens when the spotlight fades? There it was, the real dig. Tom's expression didn't falter, but for a brief moment, there was a flicker of emotion. Almost imperceptible, but it was there. Ryan, Tom replied, this time more serious. The spotlight was never my goal. Legacy was. The words landed heavily, the audience reacting with an audible ooh. Ryan forced a chuckle, but there was a crack in his armor now. All right. You're good at this. But hey, we've got some fan-submitted questions. And they didn't hold back. Tom smiled, but there was a quiet intensity beneath it. The real challenge of the evening wasn't over. It was just beginning. The audience could sense it. This wasn't going to be just another late-night interview. Something bigger was unfolding. Ryan Blake shuffled the cue cards in his hands, masking the slight tension building behind his polished grin. This interview was supposed to be a ratings booster, an easy, crowd-pleasing conversation with a Hollywood icon. Instead, Tom Cruise was flipping the script, steering the dialogue with a calm authority that Ryan hadn't anticipated. All right, Tom, Ryan began, flashing a forced smile. Let's shake things up a bit. We asked fans to send in their boldest questions. Ready for some heat? Tom tilted his head, the edges of his smile softening. I'm always up for a challenge. The audience cheered, but the undercurrent of tension was impossible to ignore. Ryan picked the top card from the stack, glancing at the bold print before reading it aloud. Tom, a lot of people think you're too intense. Like you take yourself way too seriously. Ever think of just chilling out and letting go of this perfect image thing? The words echoed through the studio, the audience reacting with scattered gasps and awkward chuckles. Claire backstage clenched her jaw. Ryan wasn't pulling punches anymore. He was trying to provoke Tom into a misstep. Tom, however, didn't blink. I've never aimed for perfect, Tom said smoothly. But I do aim for authentic. People confuse dedication with ego sometimes. I push myself because I believe in giving 100%, whether it's a movie, a conversation, or apparently an interview. The audience applauded. Tom's calm, thoughtful responses were winning them over, but Ryan wasn't done. He set the cue cards aside. Okay, let's go off script. Claire's heart sank. This can't be good. Ryan leaned in, his tone dropping into something more personal. You ever wonder if your obsession with control is why some of your closest relationships didn't last? I mean, you've had some public breakups. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Even the camera crew froze for a beat. It was a low blow, unexpected and bold. For the first time, a hint of tension crossed Tom's face. There was a moment of stillness, the kind that pulls everyone to the edge of their seats. Then Tom spoke. You know, Ryan, it's easy to sit in this chair and pick apart someone's life when you're not the one living it. People see the headlines, the rumors, but they rarely see the why behind the choices. Ryan, sensing the audience shifting in Tom's favor, doubled down. But don't you think fame's kind of trapped you? Like, you can't even have a real moment without it being broadcast everywhere. Tom paused, considering the question deeply. Fame doesn't trap you. You do, when you start living for the spotlight instead of your purpose. The room erupted in applause. Ryan's confidence faltered. He wasn't used to losing control of an interview, and Tom's steady, composed demeanor was unraveling his usual playbook. But just as it seemed Tom had the upper hand, Ryan played his wild card. Let's roll the clip, Ryan announced, motioning to the crew. The giant LED screen behind them flickered to life. To Tom's surprise and Claire's horror, it wasn't a trailer or movie highlight. Instead, it was leaked behind-the-scenes footage from a set, showing Tom mid-heated argument with a crew member. Though it was clear Tom was calling out safety violations, the clip, stripped of context, painted him as aggressive and domineering. The audience gasped again, this time less supportive. Tom's jaw tensed, but he didn't look away. He watched the clip play out in its entirety before the screen went dark. Ryan sat back smugly. So, Mr. Legacy, care to explain that? For a beat, the entire studio was silent. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every muscle twitch, every breath. Then Tom spoke, his voice steady. Context matters, Ryan. That was a moment where safety protocols were ignored, and lives were at risk. I don't apologize for demanding respect for the people who trust me to lead them safely through high-risk scenes. A few audience members clapped, slowly at first, then louder as Tom's words settled in. But here's the real question, Tom added, locking eyes with Ryan. Why do we love tearing people down for caring too much, but we turn a blind eye when they don't care at all? The audience roared. Ryan sat in stunned silence, clearly thrown. This wasn't how he thought the night would go. Backstage, Claire pumped her fist in the air. He turned it around. But Tom wasn't done. Ryan, you ever wonder why you need to poke at people's worst moments to get a reaction? The tables had officially turned. And the audience? They were hooked. Ryan Blake's carefully curated confidence was cracking. The audience's roaring applause still echoed in the studio. But it wasn't for him. It was for Tom. He could feel the shift in energy, the weight of public opinion tipping against him. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to control the narrative. Claire, backstage, let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Tom had handled the trap with poise, but she knew Ryan wasn't done yet. Talk show hosts didn't back down that easily, especially not when their ego was bruised on live TV. Ryan leaned forward, clasping his hands together, his smile returning, but this time, it didn't reach his eyes. All right, Tom. You're smooth, I'll give you that. But let's talk about legacy. You've been in this industry for decades. Action star, producer, even your own stuntman. But with all that, some say you're clinging to relevance. Ever wonder if it's time to step aside for the new generation? The words hit heavy, the audience collectively gasping again. Claire flinched. It was a direct shot at Tom's career longevity, a calculated insult. But Tom didn't falter. Instead he chuckled, a deep, genuine laugh that cut through the tension. Ryan, I don't see legacy as something you hand off. It's something you build, brick by brick, for as long as you can. And when the time's right, you don't need to step aside. The next generation just steps forward naturally. The audience erupted in applause again. But Ryan wasn't letting go. And yet, you're still front and center, still doing your own stunts, still chasing the spotlight. Doesn't sound like you're ready to let anyone else have it. Tom's smile faded slightly, his jaw tightening. I don't chase the spotlight, Ryan. I chase excellence. There's a difference. The words landed with weight, but Ryan noticed the subtle shift in Tom's demeanor. A flicker of irritation beneath his calm surface. Good. There's the crack. Then from backstage, Claire's earpiece buzzed. Ryan's going off script again. He's got something else lined up, a producer warned. Claire's stomach dropped. What is it? But the feed cut off before she got an answer. Back on stage, Ryan cleared his throat, his smug grin fully back. Since we're talking legacy, Tom, I did some digging. Turns out there's a young up-and-coming stuntman, Jake Reynolds, who claims you shut down his shot at breaking into the industry. Said you told producers he wasn't cut out for big films. That true? The audience went silent again. Tom's face darkened, not with guilt, but with something deeper. I know Jake, he said quietly. And no, I didn't block him. I told the producers he wasn't ready. There's a difference. This business can chew people up if they aren't prepared. I was trying to protect him. Ryan raised an eyebrow. That's not how he tells it. Before Tom could respond, Ryan snapped his fingers toward the wings, and a tall, athletic figure walked onto the stage. Jake Reynolds himself. The audience gasped, the tension reaching its peak. Claire nearly dropped her headset. This was the wild card. Jake, in his mid-20s, wore a forced confidence, but there was a nervous energy beneath it. He approached Tom, microphone in hand. Tom, Jake began. I grew up idolizing you. I studied your films, your stunts, everything. When I got the chance to work on one of your sets, it was a dream come true. But when I heard you told the producers I wasn't good enough, it crushed me. The raw emotion in Jake's voice tugged at the audience, but Tom didn't flinch. I didn't say you weren't good enough, Jake, Tom replied evenly. I said you weren't ready. There's a difference between throwing someone into the deep end and teaching them how to swim first. Jake hesitated, the words clearly landing. But, why didn't you tell me that directly? Tom sighed, a flicker of regret crossing his face. That's on me. I should've. Sometimes, in the chaos of a set, things slip through the cracks. Ryan pounced. So you do admit you mishandled it? Tom turned to Ryan, his voice low but powerful. I admit I'm human. I make mistakes. But I don't tear people down to boost ratings. The crowd roared in approval, their support now fully in Tom's corner. But the real moment came when Tom turned back to Jake. You want another shot? I'm starting a new project next month. You're in, if you're willing to put in the work. Jake's eyes widened, emotion washing over him. Seriously? Tom smiled. Seriously? Everyone deserves a second chance. The crowd exploded with applause, the studio vibrating with energy. Ryan sat speechless, his usual sharp tongue silenced. Claire, backstage, felt the tension in her chest finally release. Tom hadn't just handled the trap. He'd flipped it into a moment of redemption and growth. The stakes had been high, the conflict raw. But Tom Cruise walked away, not just as the hero of the interview, but as a reminder that humility, even in the face of ego and spectacle, always wins. The studio lights blazed brighter than ever, amplifying the thick tension hanging in the air. Ryan Blake, though still seated tall in his chair, had lost his earlier smugness. The crowd's energy had shifted entirely in Tom Cruise's favor, and Ryan knew it. But he wasn't done yet. Not when his reputation as a hard-hitting host was at stake. Tom, calm but alert, sat forward slightly, sensing that Ryan had one last play left. Jake Reynolds, now seated on the edge of the stage, still seemed overwhelmed by Tom's unexpected offer. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to process the moment, but he kept glancing toward Ryan, almost like he was waiting for something. Claire, still backstage, furiously scanned the cue cards and notes on her tablet. Something's off, she mumbled. The producer's voice crackled through her headset. Ryan's pushing for a bigger reveal. He thinks the ratings will skyrocket if he flips this narrative one last time. Claire's stomach twisted. Of course he does. Ryan tapped his pen on the table, his smile returning. But this time, it was razor sharp. Tom, it's sweet that you extended an olive branch to Jake. Truly heartwarming. But before we all go home feeling fuzzy inside, there's something the audience doesn't know. Tom's jaw tensed ever so slightly. He didn't like surprises, especially not in public arenas. Ryan continued. Jake didn't just come here tonight for closure, or some feel-good moment. Isn't that right, Jake? The camera panned to Jake, who froze for a split second before glancing toward Ryan. I wanted answers. But I also, Ryan cut in smoothly, also brought something along. A video. One that shows how Tom Cruise actually treated him on set. The audience gasped, their loyalty wavering as curiosity clawed its way back in. Claire shot to her feet backstage. He's bluffing. There's no video, she hissed into her mic. But Ryan gestured toward the big screen behind the stage, and the lights dimmed. Roll it, he instructed. The massive screen flickered to life. At first, the footage was grainy, behind-the-scenes clips from an old film set. But the audio was clear. Tom's voice rang out. We don't have time for this. If he can't handle it, pull him. Gasps echoed through the studio. The camera cut back to the live stage. Tom's expression was unreadable, but there was a faint glint of something in his eyes. Roll the rest, Tom said calmly, surprising everyone. Ryan hesitated but nodded to the booth. The video resumed. This time, Tom's full conversation played out. We don't have time for this. If he can't handle it, pull him for the day. Get him training. Don't throw him into this stunt cold. He's got talent, but he's not ready for this level yet. The room fell silent. The twist was undeniable. Tom hadn't dismissed Jake. He'd tried to protect him. Jake's face flushed with embarrassment as he turned toward Tom. I didn't know there was more to it. I only ever saw the first part. Tom's voice softened. That's the problem with half-truths, Jake. They make good drama but terrible lessons. The audience erupted into applause again, this time louder than before. Ryan, cornered and exposed, tried to recover. Well, Tom, even so, don't you think? But Tom stood, effectively ending the conversation. He turned to the crowd. You know, there's something I've learned over the years. Fame, status, they're fragile. But integrity, that's what lasts. Even when people twist your words, even when they try to paint you as the villain, if you stay grounded, you come out stronger. The room went wild with applause. Then, Tom extended his hand to Jake. You still want that spot on the new project? Jake, now visibly emotional, shook his hand. More than anything. Tom smiled. Then start fresh, with all the facts this time. The cameras panned to Ryan, who now sat slumped in his seat, visibly defeated. Claire backstage let out a breath of relief, a wide grin spreading across her face. That's how you handle a takedown. The tension dissolved, but the emotional impact lingered. Tom had faced public humiliation, manipulation, and still came out standing tall, because he stayed true to who he was. The applause still echoed through the studio as Tom Cruise stood tall, his calm demeanor now commanding the entire room. The big reveal had flipped the narrative, leaving the once smug Ryan Blake visibly rattled. The host shuffled his cue cards, desperate for a comeback, but the damage was done. The audience wasn't on his side anymore. They were with Tom. Tom turned back to Jake Reynolds, who stood frozen, still trying to process everything. The young actor's face was a blend of shock and guilt, his earlier frustration now replaced with deep regret. I'm sorry, Tom, Jake finally stammered, his voice cracking. I let my anger cloud everything. I should have found out the truth before holding on to all that resentment. Tom's expression softened. We've all been there, Jake. The hardest lessons are usually the ones we resist the most. The audience responded with soft murmurs of agreement, many nodding along. It wasn't just a moment between two actors. It was a life lesson playing out live. Ryan, still clinging to control, leaned into his mic. But Tom, don't you think public figures like yourself have a responsibility to clear up misunderstandings before they spiral like this? Tom chuckled lightly, not missing a beat. I do, Ryan. But I also believe people have a responsibility to dig deeper before judging others. Half the world's conflicts come from people reacting before understanding. Another round of applause. Ryan sat back, defeated. At that moment, Claire stepped onto the stage from backstage, breaking protocol. The crowd murmured in surprise as she walked straight up to Tom, holding her earpiece in her hand. Sorry to crash the party, she said with a smile. But there's something the audience deserves to know. Tom raised an eyebrow, but Claire continued. This whole exposé tonight? Ryan planned it to boost ratings. Jake was just the bait. None of this was about closure. It was about creating controversy. Gasps filled the studio. Ryan's face turned crimson, but Claire wasn't done. I saw the emails, she said, turning to the audience. This wasn't supposed to end with a feel-good moment. Ryan wanted Tom to look bad. But guess what? Integrity won. The crowd erupted into applause, louder, more passionate than before. Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear into his seat. Tom turned to Claire, impressed. You didn't have to do that. She shrugged. Someone had to. Tom smiled. Good people still exist. With that, he faced the crowd one last time. If tonight taught you anything, let it be this. Don't rush to judgment. Stories have layers, and sometimes the truth is hidden beneath the noise. The audience was on their feet, clapping, cheering, some even wiping away tears. Jake, standing beside Tom, now leaned in. I'll make this right. And I'll make you proud. Tom patted his shoulder. You already did. As the camera lights dimmed and the credits began to roll, it was clear. This wasn't just a talk show moment. It was a masterclass in humility, integrity, and the power of truth. The studio buzzed with a new energy as the audience slowly filed out, still chatting about the whirlwind of events they had just witnessed. Camera crews disassembled their setups, but the main players of the night lingered on stage, caught in the gravity of what had just unfolded. Tom stood near the edge of the platform, gazing out at the now empty seats, his mind replaying every moment. The tension, the big reveal, the fallout, it was all still sinking in. He wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed public confrontations, but sometimes the truth needed a stage. Jake Reynolds approached quietly, hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets, his earlier arrogance entirely stripped away. He stopped beside Tom, unsure of how to start. Tom, Jake began, his voice low. I've spent years blaming you for things I didn't even fully understand. I was so caught up in my version of the story that I didn't realize how wrong I was. Tom smiled warmly, his signature calm intact. Jake, the hardest part of growth is recognizing when we've been wrong. You did that tonight. That takes guts. Jake's shoulders eased at Tom's words, a mixture of relief and newfound respect softening his features. I don't want to be known as the guy who holds grudges. I want to do better. You already started, Tom replied. What you do next will define you far more than tonight ever could. The words landed deeply, and Jake nodded, a sense of purpose replacing his earlier frustration. Meanwhile, Claire stood at the side of the stage, watching the moment unfold. She felt a wave of satisfaction seeing Jake's humility surface, knowing her decision to expose Ryan's scheme had changed the course of the evening. Tom noticed her lingering nearby and waved her over. You were the real MVP tonight, he told her with a grin. Claire laughed, a bit embarrassed. I just couldn't let that train wreck keep going without someone pulling the brakes. Tom tilted his head. Most people wouldn't have taken that risk. She shrugged. Well, I'm not most people. The three of them shared a light laugh. The tension from earlier fully dissolved. Across the stage, Ryan Blake was packing up his things, his shoulders slumped. His show had taken a hit tonight, his credibility even more so. Tom noticed him, and hesitated for a moment before walking over. Ryan looked up, clearly expecting another jab, but Tom simply extended his hand. You wanted a big moment for your show. You got one, Tom said calmly. Ryan blinked, surprised. I didn't think you'd take the high road here. People don't grow from being humiliated. They grow from being given another chance to do better, Tom replied. Ryan hesitated before finally shaking Tom's hand. Maybe I needed this more than I realized. Tom simply nodded and walked away, leaving Ryan to sit with his own reflections. As Tom stepped outside into the cool night air, he found Claire waiting by the parking lot. You're something else, Tom Cruise, she teased. He chuckled. I get that a lot. Claire glanced up at him thoughtfully. You know, most people in your position would have just stormed off or gone viral for a rant. But you turned the whole thing into a lesson. Tom smiled, his eyes reflecting the calm wisdom that had defined his career. The real power isn't in proving people wrong. It's in helping them see what's right. Claire couldn't help but smile. Well, mission accomplished. They stood there for a beat, the city lights twinkling in the background, before Tom finally said, You ever think about producing something with a little more heart than celebrity gossip? Claire raised an eyebrow. You offering me a job? Tom shrugged. I'm offering you a chance to make a bigger impact. Think about it. With that, he walked off, leaving Claire standing there, her mind racing with possibilities. As the night settled over the city, the echoes of the evening's lessons lingered. Not just in the studio, but in the hearts of everyone who had watched. Sometimes, the biggest stage isn't where you act, it's where you reveal who you truly are. Weeks passed since the unforgettable night on the Ryan Blake show, but the ripple effect of Tom Cruise's poised confrontation was far from over. Clips of the moment went viral. Social media buzzed with praise for Tom's calm demeanor, the unexpected kindness he extended even to his critics, and the humbling of a talk show host known for pushing boundaries too far. But for Tom, it wasn't about trending hashtags or viral fame. It was about the impact. Jake Reynolds took the fallout as a wake-up call. Gone was the jaded actor with a chip on his shoulder. He began using his platform to talk about forgiveness and growth, even sharing his own flaws in interviews. Fans responded with overwhelming support, surprised by the depth they hadn't seen before. Ryan Blake's show, though shaken, took an interesting turn. Public pressure forced him to address his aggressive tactics, and after much reflection, he aired a heartfelt segment titled, When Ego Meets Empathy, openly discussing the night with surprising vulnerability. Though not everyone forgave him immediately, it sparked a dialogue about accountability in media. As for Claire, she took Tom's words seriously. A month later, Tom received an email subject, You were right. Attached was a pilot episode for a new web series she was producing, Everyday Giants, spotlighting ordinary people doing extraordinary acts of kindness. It was raw, real, and brimming with heart. Tom smiled at the screen, knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next time Tom stepped onto a set, there was a different energy about him. Not that of an untouchable celebrity, but of someone who had quietly changed the narrative around him. People didn't just see the action hero anymore. They saw the man behind the roles, someone who stood for dignity over drama, substance over spectacle. One afternoon, while walking through downtown LA, Tom noticed a young man struggling to get his guitar case out of a cab. Without a second thought, he stepped in to help. The kid looked up wide-eyed. "Whoa, you're Tom Cruise." Tom grinned. "Yeah, but right now, I'm just the guy helping you with your guitar." The kid chuckled nervously. "Thanks, man. I don't think anyone's ever just helped without expecting something." Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "The best kind of help is the kind that doesn't need to be noticed." As he walked away, the kid pulled out his phone to snap a picture, only to pause and lower it. Somehow, snapping the photo felt less important than just living the moment. And that was the legacy Tom wanted to leave behind. Not the loudest voice in the room, but the one that echoed long after the noise had faded. Sometimes the most powerful moments aren't the ones captured on camera. They're the quiet ones that change people forever. Clapperboard the end.